potential rate increases for the next couple of years could be reduced from those 5.5 on water, 6.5 on sewer levels. Of course, after we go through this today, if you have any other questions or concerns where you want us to go back and rerun some numbers, happy to do so and have that revised and updated ahead of next month's meeting. I think that still, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but that gives us time to make any changes to whatever the recommended rates and fees would be for the upcoming calendar year. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just a lot of this stuff up front you've seen before. I'm going to go ahead and just turn to page 3 of 20. And basically want to point out the reason why this pro forma is important and why it sort of developed over the years is because we want to work with you all. The goal for the authority is to minimize any potential sticker shock to the users. I think there were several years dating back in the early 80s, 90s, and even as late as calendar year 2014 where certain things happened and then we had to come back and increase our rates, which produced sticker shock for the user base. So we're trying to mitigate that going forward. And one of the things we have to be cognizant of is for borrowing for projects, we have entered into a financing agreement with the state bank program called Virginia Resources Authority. And they do have a rate covenant for the authority to abide by, and that's having $1.15 for every dollar of debt service you pay. So we monitor that as one of your key benchmarks as we're going through the pro forma process each year or when we're doing a financing. On page 4, another thing that we look at is for best practices and for one of the goals of the authority is that we don't want to have less than 50% or 180 days cash on hand. And that can ebb and flow. I know you get to look at the audit one time per year. It's a picture in time. But expenditures, while they might be fairly level throughout the year with the exception of debt service payments, revenues get collected throughout the year too, but your cash flows can ebb and flow and dip below 180 or become less than optimal or less than aspirational. So one of the other things we've talked about is whether it's 50% or 180 days cash on hand, we're meeting that minimum level. One of the things we might want to consider doing over the years is having an aspirational target of 75%. And you'll see on the pro forma here shortly where we hit roughly 74% over the next several years. So I'm going to flip to page 8. And this just gives you a summary of what the rate adjustment history has been the past few years. And again, last year, the rates were set for water and sewer at about a 5.5 to 6.5% growth rate. And that's what was proposed initially in the spring leading up to this coming budget year. And again, since we did the refunding, since we did the reduced amount for the dam project, we believe we can reduce that rate, those rate increases for the upcoming year. And one thing that you'll also see here shortly is that we haven't driven them down just to hit our minimums. One of the things that makes sense to us and that we'd recommend is at least setting your rates at or above the rate of inflation, so roughly 3%. With that said, looking at page 9, this just lays out a few of the cost assumptions that we are dropping into the pro forma. And you'll see in the pro forma itself, you'll see where these line items lay out, but we can go through each of those when we get to the pro forma, and if you have any questions, we can step through those at that time. On page 10, this is the comparable water rates and fees study that staff prepares each year. It's put on the same basis as the Draper-Aden report. because that's where a lot of the data gets pulled from. You'll see in a little bit too, like we do each year, we put it in terms of the Amherst County residents, what they're paying, what their monthly bill looks like. And Ms. Moore's not here today, but one or two line items you'll see that we added because the question came up last year is what does that mean for our citizens with the rates? Why is the table for Draper-Aden not tying to the pro forma? So we added a line or two that will reconcile how those rates get tied to the Draper-Aden report. The upshot here on the water side is that Amherst is very much competitive and in the middle of your peer group. And it is going to be the same on the next page for your sewer rates and fees. Did y'all have any questions specific about the rates and fees?
I do, sorry, this is the world I live in. I like this stuff, and I'm going to have several questions as we go on, if that's all right. I'll try not to bore the
and if I can't answer it today, we'll come back and answer it again.
So you compared only to counties and authorities serving counties. Why not Lynchburg? Why not Charlottesville? Is that a density issue? Did the numbers skew, or why wasn't Lynchburg?
So I'm going to take a first crack at this and then defer to Bob on any more details. But one of the bullets we point out earlier is that a more rural system is not necessarily comparable to a more densely populated system. And that's where we get into pulling some of these other peer comparatives, but you can see the 2-week haul, the Lynchburg Metropolitan Statistical Authority, they're in the Lynchburg MSA.
Right, and serve fairly dense areas of the MSA.
Right. Mm-hmm. Bob, do you want to address those two in particular, just to give perspective on?
When I came on, I started doing this, and I was helping Dan with this many years ago when I was with Herd and Profit. And one of the things that I noticed was that it really wasn't an equitable comparison to compare us with Lynchburg. The reason being because Lynchburg is so much bigger, they've got so many more customers, and they're a municipality, so they can draw on the general fund. They're not an enterprise fund like we are.
That's actually incorrect. They are an enterprise fund.
Have they always been?
Yes.
Oh, I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's no general fund money that goes into the system.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. But that's the main reason, is that they're so much bigger than us, and it's the same reason we don't compare ourselves with Fairfax County. It's not equitable because they've got so many more customers, they've got so much more revenue that you really can't draw any rational comparisons out of doing so.
I think one thing that might be helpful going forward is to potentially add in the number of accounts these systems have as a basis of comparison. I think, again, if you have a bigger user base to draw from, you can, you have more funds to be able to grow quicker, faster, stronger, right? Or at least gives you a bigger base from which to move the needle when you need to for replenishing your funds.
I don't think it's necessary to add more and more columns to this. So just kind of confuse it a little bit.
Okay.
But bigger systems, yes, you have larger revenues, but you also have larger expenses. I think the real answer is density. How many connections do you have per mile of pipe? And it's going to be much less in a rural setting than in an urban setting. I think that makes sense.
Okay.
How is Campbell so much cheaper? Is it Rustburg? I mean, they're almost $16 cheaper for their wastewater bill than what we are.
I don't know the answer to why.
Yeah.
I've wondered that myself. I know they're very conscious about taking care of their customers. They also have, all the development going on over in that area. And we've talked before about how the supervisors pay all the availability fees and a lot of the connection fees for new business. If I remember correctly, they also have access to tobacco fund money. So they've got a lot more revenue sources than we do.
We work with Campbell County. I'd be happy, we actually have a call with them next week. I'm happy to run that up the flagpole and see what their thoughts are, how it might compare. If you're okay, I could share this analysis with them and talk through it with them and say, hey, we had some questions from the board and wanted to find out, your thoughts on the way you set your rates. Is there anything that's not necessarily apples to apples? And we could dig into that a little bit further.
I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'd be interested as well, and I think a lot of it, you do find some county-funded line items, just like Mr. Hopkins brought up.
Okay. Is that just on the water side, or, that's a global question across both the water and sewer, and
I would assume sewer as well, because if you look at the sewer rates, they are substantially cheaper. And actually, Amherst, we were substantially cheaper. We've actually increased our sewer rates because they were, over the last several years, because they were lower, quite a bit lower than our water rates. And we did increase them and have increased them more than the water rates over the last probably 5 years. So that could be something that's brought that price up as well, but certainly include that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think the other part of that too is there's couple different fee structures going on. You've got your basic service charge that we've had to ramp that up over the past several years on the sewer side, whereas water, we got to the $24 level, and that's where we've found that it's competitive for the near term, and that's where we're sort of hanging out on the water side. We can turn to that pro forma page here shortly and get into that. So I think with that said, we could go ahead and flip to the page 13 that starts the revised pro forma discussion. Going through those bullets, starting at the top, we have layered in here the capital projects that you have identified. We have dropped in the actual numbers on the $1.75 million that we borrowed last year. We are projecting out for the new raw water intake in 2023 at about $5 million. We've also got the Williams Run sewage pump station improvements in here at $5 million in calendar year 2025. I think those are still, they're rough estimates to be sure, but as those become clearer, we'll work with staff to get those refined. In this particular analysis, we are sticking with the program on the water side of not changing the water basic service charge for now, but increasing in this pro forma water rates, the water rates by 3.75% on an annual basis. And then on the sewer side, increasing the basic service charge another $1 from $6 to $7, and then 4 3/4% for the annual rate adjustment. Availability fees and connection fees would stay the same based assumed in this pro forma. And that, with these assumptions, the way the pro forma currently is, we're able to maintain that minimum debt service coverage ratio or stay above it of 1.5 times. Again, that's $1.15 for every dollar of debt service you have, and we stay above our minimum threshold of 180 days cash on hand. Okay. Page 14 is the same chart you've seen in the report in previous years, just trying to show you the past several years what the rates and fees have been, what percentage rates increased. And then from 22 and beyond, the highlighted pieces, that's where we're saying instead of being 5.5% and 6.5% between water and sewer this year, we may be able to back that down to 3.25% and 4 3/4. 3 3/4 and 4 3/4. On page 15, this is the high level, this is the one pager that has the detailed breakout of revenues and expenses. And on line 28, that's where you see, or 25 is where the total expenses are. 28 is where you take revenues minus your total operating expenses, and that's how much money you have left at the end of the day to pay for debt service and other capital costs. And you can see that on line 38, that's your parity debt service coverage ratio. That's, again, that's where we have to be at $1.15 or better. You can see that we go down to $1.19 in 2026 with the assumptions we've got in the pro forma right now. And then on line 41, your non-designated funds, those are your most flexible funds, we go down to 74% out there in 2027. And I think a large part of that too, y'all may recall the county, instead of doing the $150,000, $170,000 a year that they have been putting away in your designated funds for line extensions, Bob, that's right. Instead of putting that aside the next 5 years, they've given you or made available to you $1 million in the current calendar year, right? Whether it was July, part in July, and the other part should be by calendar year and in December. So you'll see here shortly, there's a highlighted section in one of the pages of the pro forma details that is zeroed out. And we've got $1 million coming in 2021. Okay, and I think in large part, we just want to make sure we're cognizant that those funds are sitting there and how we spend them down would impact that ratio if we spent down too quickly, et cetera. So, does that make sense? Yes, so you have a question?
No, it doesn't. And sorry, this relates to a question that I asked right before the meeting.
Yeah.
Because I noticed that there wasn't any line extension expenditures in the future. It makes sense, the answer you made sense. But why is that going to affect our cash percentage if it's not factored into the pro forma? So it should be beneficial to our cash position, right?
It's beneficial right now. It's sort of, you get a one-year pop in 2021. And that's actually helping your ratio back up on the front page of the pro forma.
But we're not, are we showing that in 2021?
Yeah, it's on page 17, under 2021, up on line 305. It's general fund transfer of $1 million.
Okay.
Does that help?
Well, I see it, so that gives us a one-time pop, but still going forward, you know, whereas we've been spending more than half of that every year, well, we've been spending about 400 or a little, between 350 and 400 per year, and then in 22 going forward, we're not spending any. Even though we get $1 million if we get $1 million in 21, that still doesn't make up for what we had been spending for the next 5 years.
Well, actually, Mr. Perot, it does, because we've been getting about $180,000 per year. It goes up by a certain small percentage every year. I think it's the CPI. So it's $180,000.
What goes up, the county contribution?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's matching what the service authority puts away. So if you take that $180,000, just figure $180,000, multiply that by 5, it's less than $1 million. So the service authority actually ends up a little bit better ahead by taking the $1 million over the next 5 years instead of the county annual contribution.
Whereas over the past 5 years, looking backwards, we've spent about $2 million or more in water line extensions.
Well, this is sewer. This is all sewer. This is all going to be for sewer, not water.
This is water and sewer extension, the line item. I'm looking at line item. I begin to need glasses. This is awful. Is it 323? On page 17, water and sewer line extensions. If you add those numbers up, you're well over $1 million. And then going forward, there's nothing. So we get $1 million, which is the service authority should be very appreciative of the county's contribution in 2021. But then we're at zero after that. The bigger question is, with long-term decline in water consumption, the way that we're going to increase our revenues is through expansion. So if we're not funding expansion, how are we going to have that 4% rate revenue increase year over year if we're not expanding? So we should be putting money or anticipating money into investments in expansion.
or you raise rates to come up with the decline in water usage. I mean, there's two alternatives to that.
Yeah.
So I guess what we could do is run another scenario, because I think a lot of the line replacement you're referring to, I know which line you're talking about in here, but I think some of that stuff is moved in the budget and showing under different categories in the operational and maintenance side. So I want to make sure we work with Bob to get maybe something that's more reflective of apples to apples for your purposes here.
I'm not questioning the numbers, I'm questioning from a policy perspective. Are we showing that we're not going to invest in any more? Besides the $1 million, are we going to invest in any more extensions? And I think we have to. And so that's
Gotcha.
that's
Okay.
my purpose from the policy.
Okay.
From the policy side. If the dollars are there somewhere, then I'm happy, and if somebody could highlight them, that'd be great.
Sure.
But I just wanted to be there. Thanks.
All right.
All right, any more, are you done? Do you-
Did you leave yet?
Yeah, I don't have any more questions, you
No,
know.
I'm here, Charles, just, but, I mean, if y'all have more questions, it's up to y'all. What we can do, I think what may make sense is drawing those numbers out for the future expansion assumptions. I think for now, we've kept it still conservative based on everything that's going on in the current environment and based on prior growth. I know the numbers have been ticking up a little bit, but we stayed conservative on this particular case. So I think it makes sense maybe to bring back another case to you all next month before you set your rates for next year.
Well, I'm fine with this. I'd rather have a lower rate increase because I think if I'm looking at this board, I'm the only one that actually pays a water service fee with the county. That was one thing I advocated for when I was on the board, is having more members that actually paid the fees. Because if you're not hurt by it, then what difference does it make what the rates are? You're not paying them. And so, we got to be cognizant of the people that are already in our community. The other thing is, we're talking a lot about expansion, but we have a very, very aging system. We heard today from someone now that their septic systems are failing, but there's places all over throughout the county that they have water lines that are 80 years old running through Madison Heights. So that's going to be a big expenditure. Bob could probably tell you. I know Dan French, if he was here with us, God bless him, he could tell you all about it. He's the one that schooled me on the amount of infrastructure we're going to have to put in through Madison Heights just to upkeep what we have. So, and a lot of that is getting to the end of life expectancy. So you've got to take expansion with also taking care of what you already have. And I have faith in Bob that he'll be able to do that.
Thank you,
So-
Mr. Pitt.
Point of clarification, so while I'm on private well and septic, I do have constituents that pay county water and sewer bills, so it does matter to me. But, so you said that, I guess what we're required to do is to keep like a 50% reserve, but we're striving to do 75%, and we're right at 74% now, right? Is that what you said?
When you say, I just want to clarify, you're only required to the extent, it's an internal operational policy. That's not the covenant that you're beholden to VRA for.
All right, so I guess, and I'm not implying that we do this, but the question is, instead of 74%, what if we drop back to 60%? What does that do to the rate?
Bless you.
Anything?
I'm with you, and that's what I was saying, is with that $1 million infusion and that being a part of your cash, that was sort of assisting you on the front end from calendar year 21 and beyond. If we were to pull that $1 million out, go back to the regular general fund contribution
The
annually,
rates would be.
you would see that that 74 drops down to, I think, like 54%.
Okay.
Following up on that, Mr. Martin, a few years ago, Dan had always set the policy of 50%, but aspirational 60%. And I think it was early 2018, we had gotten up to about 61, 62%. And with the James River Bank Stabilization Project, the Corps of Engineers had misestimated their project, and they came back and hit us with a $600,000 second assessment against the service authority, which we had to pay, we had no choice, and that dropped us from 61 to 62% to 50.2%. So, and 600,000 in infrastructure is a relatively small cost. That's not a lot of money. And so as soon as that happened, I immediately started looking at, we have to get up to at least 75%.
And that bullet, just as a reminder, I sort of skimmed over it, and I apologize, but that's on page 4 at the bottom. Just as a reminder, it was roughly $570,000, to Bob's point, close to $600,000 that sort of got pulled right away. And if you hadn't had it, you'd have been in worse shape. So it's one of those things where you're trying to manage the best practices and trying to, and to Mr. Perro's point earlier, you have the more densely populated areas with the systems, they can actually recover, can recover their cash reserves more quickly based on their user base versus a more rural, smaller rural system.
Well, you have longer extensions with less houses on it, therefore you have less connection fees and so forth, right?
So I guess a comment, if we really wanted to look at reducing our rates, we need to increase the number of users, possibly, right?
Right,
Okay.
and you'd have to incur the capital costs that go with it too, so.
Right, and obviously there's economies that go there, but, so my understanding is you'll be back next month, or?
Yes, sir. I'll come
Okay,
back.
and you'll talk to Campbell and at least bring back some anecdotal
Yes, sir.
thoughts? Okay.
One other thing, Mr. Bew, if that's all right?
Oh, no, sir.
So I do see, and I talked to you about this outside also, about, and I know it's not incorporated in the report, but basically funding our depreciation. You have the decline or the deterioration, to Mr. Pugh's point earlier, the deterioration of existing assets.
Right.
And replacement, the necessary replacement of them. He's exactly right. We do need to do that. I see line 324 has line replacement money, but is that, do you have any idea about what our depletion of assets rate would be, and is that even close to it? I think that's an interesting metric. Most, I don't know of a single municipality or utility or authority that can completely fund the depreciation, but it helps if you know where you are on a percentage basis.
Yeah, no, that's a good concept. So I think we can incorporate a line that gives you some kind of picture on your level of depreciation and how, I guess would we be able to talk or show the replacement cycle and where we are?
Sure. It's, on average, it's about, well, I think, help me, Mr. Hopkins, AWWA says 3% of the system annually.
I'm not familiar with that figure, but
It may be, there's some guidelines from AWWA, I believe, and that's a nice benchmark to use. Last question, does the raising minimum wage rate have a material effect?
The raising minimum wage have a material
Yeah,
effect?
does that affect is that a material effect on the expenses?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. We have been assuming 3% growth in here for most of the operations and maintenance costs. So I don't think we have, it would be buried in the administration and general line item, which I believe most of that is being grown at 3%. So I don't know how many personnel that would impact. That's a good question I don't know the answer to, but we'll try to identify and see if we can't get some clarity on that for next month.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are there any further questions? If not, I suppose we'll see you back here next month with the information that, with Campbell County and the other information. I appreciate your time today, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
All right, we have our monthly financial report, July 2021.
thank you, Mr. Pugh. Before I get started, at the last meeting, Ms. Moore had asked me to get a revenue update on the Westie Apartments, the old Phelps Road School. And since May, we brought in about $2,500. The last bill for September 1st was a little over $600. So I guess I'll bring that back for next month when she will hopefully be here. Okay, the financial report for July 2021, as always, comparing to this year-to-date and comparing through the same period of July 2020. Water sales were up almost $150,000, over 8.5% compared to 2020. Revenues were up over $436,000, almost 23%, but that includes the last VDOT reimbursement on the Woody's Lake Road project, which is not really revenue. But even if you take that out, we're still at about $170,000, almost 9% ahead of last year. If you recall, last month, water connections for both water, well, we'll start with water, was actually, in the revenue figure was actually negative. We were actually doing less, but we had a real good July for water connections. So you can see we went from about negative, I think it's about $5,600 to plus over almost $25,000. So almost 22% compared, better than 2020. So far, 25 new water service connections this year, and that compares very favorably with last year and the 5-year annual average. Going to wastewater, sales have, they continue to not do as well. We're still in the black compared to 2020, but we're only about 0.01% ahead, about $4,350 ahead of 2020. Total revenues, it's actually almost 30% in the hole, but in 2020 we had the last PRISM reimbursement on the Old Town Madison Heights project. And again, that's not really revenue, it's a reimbursement which wasn't repeated in 2021. So I think it should be taken out and refigured, and if you look at it that way, we're almost $60,000, almost 12% ahead of 2020. Connections, again, we're doing very well with the big July compared to normal. Water and wastewater sales total, over $150,000, almost 7% ahead of 2020. Revenues almost $220,000 ahead, over 8% ahead compared to 2020. Last month I reported that as of with the governor's COVID emergency ending as of August 29th, we could go back to assessing late fees and cutting off customers for non-payment if the balances were big enough. And as of mid-August, we had a list of 56 accounts that we were planning on closing at the end of the month. But we went through and issued notices by mail, email, the Notify software, and door hangers, and we cut that list of 56 down to 21. The other 35 all came in and made at least partial payments, and if it was a partial payment, they got on installment payment plans, and if they stick on the plans, then those balances will be eliminated within a year. So we got a real good response on our efforts to keep from cutting people off. We got about over $300 back from the state debt set-off program for uncollectible, unpaid utility bills, and that's, I think, the 4th month in a row we've gotten money from them. And the last thing, if you look at the charts, we didn't have a good July, and I'm optimistically hoping that is due, number one, to COVID, people not being able to pay their bills, and number two, that it was just whatever residential area we build for July just wasn't one of the really big areas. So I'm expecting and hoping that August will reverse that. But even with that, if you look at the cumulative, we're still, compared to projections, we're almost $140,000 ahead compared to the projections I made at the beginning of the year. And that's all I've got, unless you've got questions.
Board, are there any questions?
I do have a question. Looking at expenditures, I've been looking at the Appalachian Power expenditures and trying to make sense of them. I created a bit of a chart, and I'm having trouble lining expenditures up. For the next reports or going forward, could you somehow tag that with maybe under Appalachian Power, put it put a account number associated with it.
Sure.
Because I've seen in multiple occasions where the water treatment plant's been, for instance, called the filter plant, that there are 3 or 4 Elon Road locations that don't correlate. I think Elon Road once took the water treatment plant fee. And let's see. I'm looking at the spreadsheet right now. Just a way so that it correlates so you can understand. You've got, as far as I can tell, there are 3 different Elon Road meters.
Yes, sir.
And it's hard to tell what's what. And the reason I'm getting into this level of detail is because if that is not recorded correctly, then it makes me wonder what else may not be reported correctly. So if we could take a look at that and have some consistency in how you're reporting out those meter locations, then that would make me sleep a little bit better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Glad to do it.
Any further questions? If not, we'll go ahead and move to the staff report. Mr. Hopkins.
Okay. You've got the staff report with you. I'm only going to speak on the ones that actually need to be spoken of, but you've got all the other information there. The James River Bank Stabilization Project, there's no change to the severity of the problem. We're continuing to stockpile construction debris. I was actually hoping to start the Colony Road Waterline Extension Project last month because we're going to be putting that under the sidewalk, so we're going to be demolishing all that sidewalk, and we would have had that much more concrete to put into the James River Bank Stabilization, but VDOT said no, so we're waiting for them to approve the plan so we can start that. But we've got actually 3 different areas that we're looking at for funding. The first, I reported last month that I've contacted Ben Klein's office about getting a congressional earmark, and that they're not really getting very far with it, but I'm hoping we get some response on that. As with the county's ARPA funding, I actually submitted 12 different requests for funding, and I think the number 3 priority or the number 2 priority was some money for this project. And I'm starting to work with Kelly Hitchcock at Region 2000 about doing a hazard mitigation grant application. I see you all shaking your heads, but I don't have a lot of optimism about that, because remember, we did a project, a hazard mitigation grant application last year on the, that was tied into CVTC, and I could never even get anybody at FEMA to take my phone calls or respond. It was, and I spent a lot of time trying to get some kind of information about what was going on, and I couldn't get hold of anybody once we got the grant application in. So I don't have a lot of faith with that. The VC Mobile Home Park, we have worked out the funding procedure on the $250,000 we're getting from the state. The plans for Phase 1, the Colony Road extension, have been submitted to VDOT back on August 9th. We should have comments back from them soon. The Graham Creek Reservoir Dam Improvements Project, those plans have been submitted to the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. We should be getting comments back from them soon. The Emergency Action Plan has been updated. The Westvale Court Sanitary Sewer Extension, the Developer Service Authority Agreement has been signed and executed and recorded. The developer has made the partial tap fee payment of $11,400 to cover the engineering services. And Hurt and Profit is working on the survey and design. We've pretty much confirmed that we can do gravity flow by running a line across the property north of this area to tie into our sewer. And that's the Viola's View property that they're looking at putting in 50 townhomes. And that the owners have said that if we can make it work, then it doesn't affect their project. They're all on board with it, so I'm expecting to be able to get an easement to be able to do this. On the EDA business friendliness, priority 1A, you just had the pro forma presentation. Priority 2 is the communications efforts. I'm going to let Mr. Hall give a quick update on the new ACSA website.
Okay, so we, to try to be consistent with the procurement requirements, we reached out to 4 different vendors. Can you guys hear me okay?
Okay.
And after evaluating, actually, we were required to get at least 3 telephone quotes back since the dollar amount for the procurement requirement. So we actually reached out to 4 different vendors. One was unresponsive. And after evaluating the bids and the information given back, we've chosen a local vendor out of Lynchburg to help us with our website. And we have several, hopefully, some enhancements for our citizen base that's going to help us with fillable forms, easier access for them to get information, say, for example, closures, things that we need to post right away. Hopefully, it's going to be an attractive website. We can start looking at the number of hits we're getting to see how much use we're getting out of it. So I'm pretty excited moving forward. I do have information about the company and some of the experience that they've had, and I'll tell you that they've done some work for the town of Alta Vista, town of Brookneal, Region 2000 Service Authority, Campbell County Water Authority, etc. And so I feel confident moving forward. We've chosen a good vendor to get this off the ground.
Any questions, board? Sounds like a good job. We'll look forward to that. And is it up and running yet? Or
Not yet.
what will that be?
It's going to take us about 4 to 6 weeks for us to have our final meeting to take a look at it and get some training. And then, of course, we'll be working with the Amherst County folks to be sure that the 2 websites tie together, link together, so that when you go on the Amherst website, it will link back to the Amherst County Service Authority website.
All right. Any other questions, board? Well, we appreciate it. Thank you. All right, we'll go on to new business.
No,
and-
not-
oh, no, you
not
still-
quite done.
All right.
Priority 6 under the business friendliness is the water office, and it's, I'm disappointed that the only 2 members that were able to attend the tour are not here, so they couldn't corroborate what and maybe speak a little bit about what they saw. But we had a tour on August 25th. Ms. Moore and Mr. Woods, myself, Mr. Hall, and 3 state officials. If you all still want to look at it, I can schedule another tour. I've actually, we probably won't have time today, but I've also got a slide presentation, just some photographs I've taken to show you what it looks like. So we're still looking at the possibility of moving the water office to this building 10 over at Lower Rapidan in the training center. And I've talked to a couple county staff about the possibility of a Madison Heights government office. And I know Buildings Inspections is looking to hire more staff. They're spending a lot of time in Madison Heights, so they might be able to use an annex office. Public Safety, the nearest EMS office is actually north of Route 130, which is a long way to go through Madison Heights to get to the southern end of the county. So an EMS office down in the training center area might be a real good idea. And Mr. Bryan has proposed using or looking at the entire Lower Rapidan area as a pandemic overflow area for patients. We didn't really have the issue with COVID so far, but he was looking into that in case we needed to have some place for patients to go if the hospitals got overloaded. And with the Lower Rapidan being a medical dental complex, that seems like a good place to go do that. Speaking of COVID-19, for the Phase 2 of the Municipal Utility Relief Program, we got $6,100 from the state. All that money's been applied. We got 16 applications. Everybody got at least $100. And we're looking at a Phase 3. There are actually 3 different ways of course, this is for customer arrearages of utility bills. And we're looking at 3 different ways of phasing a Phase 3. I told you last month about a Department of Social Services survey that we completed, and we requested $50,000 out of that survey. We haven't heard back from them yet. There's a rumor of another state program coming from the governor's office, similar to the programs of 2020 and early 2021. And I mentioned a few minutes ago, the Service Authority's ARPA request to the supervisors. My number 1 priority was $50,000 for this purpose. And the last thing on that is I already talked about the governor's emergency ending and how we responded to the cutoffs. So that's all I've got on old business, unless you all have questions.
Seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and go to new business. Our first item is Mr. Dan French.
Yes, sir. I reported you all, sent you all emails to you all, the supervisors, county staff, and a heck of a lot of other people last week about his passing on the 29th. I think it was on the 29th. There is going to be a quote-unquote Remembrance Day this next Friday from 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the Coolwell Rec Center. I'm working on the actual permit application to go into Parks and Rec, but I've already talked to Mr. Nally, the director there, and he said it shouldn't be a problem. So I'm hoping that as many people as possible can come and help the family get through this.
Yeah, I knew Mr. French very well. I had a good relationship with him, always did, and tell you, he knew so much about this county. I mean, he knew everything. I guess he learned it from Lanham, Henry Lanham, who was the precursor to him, and boy, he knew everything. I mean, you could ask him. He was like David Prophet, I guess you would say, on the water side, and it's just amazing. You're here one day and gone the next. You know, you never would have expected. You know, he didn't look like he was ill or unhealthy, and the next thing you know, you're no longer on this earth. So he will be missed. Highly intelligent, extraordinary with local history, and a resource that we no longer have, but he will be missed. So.
Well, the resource is going to be particularly missed. I mean, ever since I came on, he always said that it takes 2 years, 24 months to learn this job. And when I came on, I had 13 before he retired. So I've been heavily relying on him ever since. And it's amazing how many times I've called him and said, Dan, I need such and such a document. And with all the file cabinets, with all the drawers and all the folders in it, he could almost every time tell me exactly which file cabinet, which drawer, and which folder to go to. And it was almost always there. He was amazing.
All right. Well, hopefully, everybody can show up on Friday from 2 to 4 if you're available. It certainly would be good for the family to see you. So our condolences go out to the French family. Next, we got the ACSA water treatment plant sludge disposal.
Yes, sir. I sent you all, did you all have a chance to read the email that I sent I guess it was last week? And I got one response back from Ms. Tucker, who proposed that we come to a compromise, which I offered. In the past, we've always paid for the first load of sludge, and everything after that was gratis because the county could use the material for daily cover. And since they've already invoiced the first 3 loads, I suggested, why don't we let us pay the first invoice for 3 loads and call it a day. And I've never heard anything back. Don't remember hearing anything back from the county with that. But the big thing with me, I want you all to understand, if this is a county issue, I've got no problem with us paying the things that we're supposed to pay. The problem I've got is that we've never done this before, and the way this was done, nobody told us anything until after all the sludge was disposed. So we didn't know we were going to be invoiced until after we had already incurred the cost. And if we had known it ahead of time, we could have found a way to really mitigate those costs. So I'm just looking for direction. I don't think we should be paying it, but the county thinks that we should. So I'm throwing it all. I'm sorry, but I need to throw it back in your all's lap and see what you all want to do.
So you haven't gotten a response from the county?
Not that I've seen yet, no.
Okay.
Look, I mean, this is pretty simple. Come up with a solution and go with it. I'm fine with you all operating like you have over the past 50 years where you don't have a fee. If you have a fee, then you have a fee. But, let's just straighten this out. Everybody put on their big boy pants and get it done, one way or the other. I don't care which way it's done either. But if I had a choice, I'd just assume do it as it's always been done and haul that to our landfill for free and have at it from there.
Well, it's been proposed that if there is a county service authority memorandum of understanding and nobody can seem to find one, if there is one, it can be modified. And if it includes, if it needs to be changed to do this, then we can change it. Or Mr. Rogers suggested if you need to do an ordinance to clarify this, okay, let's do that. But you don't do that, it almost becomes a post facto law, in that you're putting something, you're changing a policy, but applying it to something that happened before you changed the policy. And to me, it just doesn't sound right. Especially when you're talking about the money that we're talking about.
Go ahead.
So I thought this was an interesting problem. It seems to me that, that the sludge could be used for, I guess, closure or surface application at some point. I had the opportunity to have lunch with Tim Wagner with CCUSA and asked him about what they do with their sludge. And he said that they've got a fellow at the farm next door that has an application permit who tests sludge, takes it, tests it, and applies it to his land. It may be worthwhile reaching out to Tim to see if that fellow would be interested in helping out our authority.
I'll do that, thank you. Now, keep in mind, this is water plant sludge, not wastewater. There may be a big difference there.
I specifically asked about water plant sludge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't typically like changing kind of what's been done in the past overnight. It would have been nice to know that it was going to change, so we could have budgeted for it. I think it's something that the board will need to discuss at a later date.
All
The
right.
board supervisor.
Yeah, I'm fine with, I kind of agree with Mr. Martin. I guess this is something, how should we proceed then? Do you
I
have a
think
suggestion
we'll bring it up
at the Board of
at the
Supervisors?
board meeting.
All right.
I mean, we could have dried it a lot further. I mean, of course, they're billing, they're invoicing by weight. We could have dried it a lot further, got the weight down. We could have found another place to take it that at a cheaper cost. And then again, it just wasn't budgeted, so it was just an issue.
All right. Well, we'll bring this up at a board meeting and have a discussion and see what we want to do.
Thank you very much. And the last thing I've got has to do with the line crew. If you look at the pictures, they had a bad month in August. It just wasn't a good month. They had a situation at Wendy's. Well, actually, with the Wendy's service line, it actually started earlier this spring. They started having a lot of backups, and we were up there almost every other week jetting out their service line and our portion of their service line. And we ran it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then in August, if you look at the photographs, we actually went through to try to figure out what was wrong with the service line, and you can see that the entire bottom, that's not the top of the line, that's the bottom of the line. So this is not like sulfuric acid gas that typically would eat out the crown of a pipe. I don't know whether we had a defective material from the pipe supplier. What I suspect is that there may be acidity in the cleansers, the cleaning agents that Wendy's is using. And I'm talking to the owner about getting the MSDS sheets for that. And this guy actually owns 14 different Wendy's, and he is now scared to death that he's going to have this kind of problem at 14 different sites because Wendy's actually mandates which cleaning agents they use. So he's going to get me the MSDS sheets. We're going to sit down and talk about it, and if it looks like there's a lot of acid materials in them, I'm going to work with him to go back to Wendy's and work with them to try to change that policy.
Mr. Hopkins, so that pipe right there is probably around 20 years old, is that correct?
Yes, sir. That pipe is ductile iron. That pipe should have lasted 80 years.
Wow.
Gone in less than 20. The other issue, at almost exactly the same time, we had a situation with the sewer on the other side of the road, right down the street. And this was our sewer, that there was, Red Roof Inn was having a lot of blockages. And they were having Roto-Rooter out there about monthly to clear out their line. And what they were doing was shoving it all into the first manhole downstream, and then, of course, the manhole got blocked. So our guys went out there, and the sludge was built up literally all the way up to the top of the frame. It was horrible. It was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. And they were out there for like 2 weeks trying to clear this thing out. And then they finally got the manhole cleared, and then what they found out was they couldn't, then the sewer downstream blocked. And they couldn't get it past the sewer, and so they actually were trying to clear that. They were trying to clear it from both sides. And what they found out was that Lumos, about 10 years ago, had put in a new cable on one of the APCO's power poles. They had to put a new guy wire on, and if you look at that photograph, that's the guy wire that goes right through the middle of our pipe. So that's what caused all this problem, both Red Roof's Inn problem, our problem, And again, it took us about a week to finally get this whole thing fixed. So they worked incredibly hard. Keep in mind, August was a hot month. A lot of it was 95, 100-degree temperatures, and these guys were out there in it all day long. And, as hard as these guys work all the time, August was particularly bad, and I would like to recognize the crew members that worked on these two jobs with a $250 bonus. And I'm not asking for any money coming out of the Service Authority. What we're going to do is go back to Loomis with a bill. And the guy from Loomis has already said, we know we screwed up. We're gonna pay whatever you send us. So I want to we're gonna send a bill. We'll get a check in. I want to take up the bonus out of that money. And so I'm looking for a recommendation from you all if that's okay.
Board? Well, I certainly commend the work they do. They were down, that's a dirty job. I mean, that is a dirty job, like the old show with Mike Rowe, dirty jobs, and you've got it there. And it was extremely hot in August. I mean, heat stroke type weather, 95 degrees. We just recently had a break from it, so I know they worked hard. I'd be more than willing to make a motion that the Amherst County Service Authority Board approve the recommendation by the ACSA Executive Director that $250 bonuses will be issued to ACSA line crewmen. There's a motion on the floor. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it, and I know they will too. And that's all I've got.
All right. Anybody, citizen comments? Anybody wishing to speak on the Amherst County Service Authority?
Well, I do have one more thing regarding the same issue. The owner of the Wendy's, Randall Absher, I understood he was actually he told me he wanted to come here and talk to the board to commend the crew on all their efforts, and I guess Randall just couldn't make it. But I'll see if I can get him to come back next month. But he was every time we were out there, he was telling me how much he appreciated it, so.
Well, we certainly do appreciate it, Bob, and we know that, that's one reason that infrastructure is so expensive. You're dealing down in the dirt and water and rock, and who knows what else you'll find, but we appreciate it. All right, I don't see anybody in the audience wanting to speak, so I'll go ahead and close citizen comments. Matters for members of the board. Mr. Para?
Do you have just a minute after the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Well, thanks.
Mr. Martin?
So, two things. I think it was at our last meeting, we talked about having the EDA come and have a discussion with this board. Has there been any movement on that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Can you reach out to them?
I seem to remember sending an email, but I may not have. I'm sorry. August was a bad month, like I said.
Understood.
I will check again.
And then, I know we've talked about this in the past, but can you brief us next month exactly on what the sewer issues are at the Seminole Shopping Center, please?
Sure.
All right, and I have nothing. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.